There is a strange quiet that lingers when you begin to wonder if the world around you is not what it claims to be. The streets you walk every day, the faces you know, the familiar weight of yore. Body, what if all of it was part of a vast stage, designed not simply for your living but for your believing? This question is not new. It has trailed human thought for centuries, weaving itself into philosophy, mysticism, and even the stories whispered in the dark. At the center of this tension stands the figure of the Demiurge, the architect of appearances, the one who builds the scaffolding of a reality so convincing that you mistake it for the whole of existence. To ask why the Demiurge wants you to believe this world is real is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is to stare directly at the possibility that your perception is not freedom but a tether, and that behind what you call life there is a deliberate design meant to keep you engaged, distracted, and compliant. Demiurge, in its oldest descriptions, is not a god of infinite compassion or transcendent unity, but a craftsman of limits, and like the boundless source from which all being flows, the Demiurge is a boundary maker, a shaper of walls, rules, and illusions. It creates order, yes, but a kind of order that closes doors rather than opens them. The stars it sets in motion, the bodies it molds. The systems of time and decay, all of these serve as intricate veils, convincing you that what you see is all there is. Belief becomes the mortar holding the edifice together. Without your faith in the solidity of matter, in the linearity of time, in the inevitability of death, the very foundation of this world would begin to tremble. That is why belief is not optional. It is essential to the Demiurge's design. You might think of this world as a stage where actors play their parts endlessly, and the Demiurge is both director and set designer. Yet the most cunning detail of this stage is that the actors do not know they're actors. They do not see the stage. They are born into their roles and take them as reality itself. Imagine watching a play where the characters genuinely believe. Their lives depend on the script, where the tears are real, the struggles authentic, and the triumphs heartfelt. The audience, too, is unaware they are watching. They are both actors and spectators, trapped in a theater without exits. What sustains this illusion is not the strength of the stage, but the sincerity of belief. Why does the Demiurge care about your belief? One answer lies in energy. Belief is a kind of currency. When you pour your attention into the world, when you fight for survival, chase after goals, despair over losses, and celebrate victories, you generate a current of psychic energy. This energy feeds the structure itself, reinforcing its solidity, repairing its cracks, and ensuring that the illusion continues seamlessly. The Demiurge is not interested in truth. It is interested in continuity. As long as you believe, the system holds. As long as you do not question, the gears keep turning. Another answer lies in control. Belief narrows the field of vision. If you are convinced this world is the only world, then your choices will always remain within its boundaries. You may rebel, but your rebellion will be staged within the same framework. Like a prisoner rearranging the furniture in a cell, the Demiurge wants you to believe, because belief closes the door to the possibility of transcendence. It convinces you that escape is either impossible or unnecessary. In this way, belief becomes both a comfort and a cage. Yet, to paint the Demiurge as a villain alone would be too simple. There is also a strange generosity in its work. Without the Demiurge's illusion, human beings might not learn the lessons that limitation teaches. Struggle, loss, growth, compassion, these are sharpened by the conditions of a finite world. The Demiurge creates a crucible where souls are tested, where choices have weight, because they are made under the veil of forgetfulness. To live here is to be challenged by the density of matter and the heaviness of time, to be asked whether you will sink into the illusion or use it as a ladder. This paradox is what makes the question so haunting. On one hand, The Demiurge seeks your belief, because it needs you to keep the illusion alive. On the other, it unwittingly provides you with the very stage on which awakening can occur. The illusion is strong, but cracks appear in it, moments of déjà vu, dreams that feel more real than waking, mystical insights, or the quiet intuition that the world is too perfect in its design of suffering and pleasure to be accidental. These cracks are invitations. They suggest that the Demiurge's control is not absolute, that belief can be redirected, and that awakening is not only possible but inevitable for those who question deeply enough. The introduction to this theme, then, is less about condemning the Demiurge and more about recognizing the architecture of your own imprisonment. You live in a world that constantly asks for your trust in its reality. Every advertisement, every law, every institution, every sunrise is part of a chorus singing the same refrain. This is real. This is all there is. Do not look beyond. To ask why the Demiurge wants you to believe is to pause, turn away from the chorus, and listen for another sound of faint resonance that belongs not to the architect of appearances but to the source that precedes it. Perhaps the Demiurge wants you to believe because belief keeps you predictable. Perhaps it wants you to believe because belief is fuel, the way a fire needs oxygen. Or perhaps it wants you to believe because, in a strange way, you also wanted to enter this stage, to experience the drama as if it were real. The truth may be layered, and to uncover it requires not just intellectual reasoning, but a willingness to stand at the edge of what you call reality and risk asking, what if none of this is as it seems? This is where our journey begins, not with answers, but with the weight of the question itself. To examine the motives of the Demiurge is to begin dismantling the spell of unquestioned belief. It is to take the first step away from the stage, even while the play continues round you, and once you begin to see the scaffolding, you cannot help but wonder who you're beyond the script, what lies beyond the set, and whether the light that shines through the cracks might reveal not just a hidden truth, but the real home of your being. To explore why the Demiurge wants you to believe this world is real, we must go beyond the surface. Imagery of cages and veils. Beneath the metaphors lies a framework of ideas that stretch across philosophy, mysticism, and psychology. These themes are not abstract curiosities. They are the silent currents shaping how you think, how you suffer, and how you search for a meaning. To see them clearly is to begin unraveling the logic of belief itself. At the heart of this inquiry is the tension between appearance and essence. The world you perceive presents itself as self-sufficient. Mountains rise, rivers flow, bodies are born and decay, and you are told this is the totality of existence. Yet there is a long tradition of thought, Gnostic, Platonic, mystical, that insists what you see is not the essence, but only the mask. The Demiurge, as the artisan of this mask, thrives on your willingness to confuse it with reality. If you mistake the mask for the face, you will never suspect that something deeper hides beneath. This confusion is the first and most crucial theme. The conflation of what is given to your senses with what is ultimately real. Another core theme is the economy of attention. Belief is not passive. It directs your energy. When you believe this world is absolute, your attention funnels entirely into its dramas. You chase careers, cling to relationships, agonize over failures, and celebrate fleeting triumphs. The Demiurge benefits from this, because attention sustains the machinery of the world. It is as if your focus acts like electricity powering a vast system of appearances. If your belief weakens, if you begin to hold your attention differently, the machinery falters. This is why belief must be maintained not once, but constantly, reinforced by culture, ritual, and social consensus. Alongside attention lies the theme of confinement. The Demiurge shapes not only the outer world, but the very categories through which you think: language, time, identity. These are the fences round your consciousness. You are taught to experience yourself as a single individual moving forward in a linear story. locked into birth, middle, and inevitable end. But what if time is not linear? What if identity is more fluid than a single name or body? These questions reveal how belief in the Demiurge's structure limits the imagination. To believe the world is real is to accept the rules of its confinement without question. Like playing a game without knowing you could ever leave the board. Interwoven with this is the theme of ignorance. In Gnostic thought, ignorance is not merely the absence of information, but a deliberate condition engineered into the system. The Demiurge wants you to remain unaware of your origins, of the transcendent source from which you came, by keeping you fixated on the sensory world. It prevents you from remembering that you are more than this body, more than this lifetime, more than this script. Ignorance is both the lock and the key, as long as you remain unaware. The illusion works flawlessly. Once awareness sparks, the machinery trembles. There is also the theme of complicity. It is tempting to cast the Demiurge as a tyrant imposing illusions upon unwilling victims. But what if, at some level, you agreed to participate? Many esoteric traditions suggest that souls enter the world voluntarily, choosing limitation in order to experience growth. In this view, the Demiurge is not only a jailer, but also a teacher, providing the harsh conditions under which hidden capacities are tested and revealed. If this is true, then belief in the world's reality is not simply oppression. It is also part of a larger design you once embraced. The challenge is to remember that agreement and to see through the illusion without becoming bitter toward it. Power is another pillar. The Demiurge's authority depends on collective consent. No illusion can function unless the majority sustains it together. The world you live in is reinforced by billions of people agreeing, tacitly or explicitly, that this is real. Money has value because everyone believes it. Borders exist because everyone believes they do. Death is feared because everyone believes it is the end. The Demiurge uses collective belief as the strongest form of validation. To step outside this consensus is not only disorienting, but also threatening to the system, which is why those who question too deeply are often dismissed, mocked, or even punished. The Demiurge guards its power by protecting consensus at all costs. Behind all these themes lies the ultimate one, forgetting. To forget your true origin is to live fully inside the illusion. This forgetting is not accidental, it is the very mechanism by which the world operates. When you were born, you forgot where you came from, what you are, and why you entered. The Demiurge ensures this amnesia so that you can participate in the play without constantly breaking the fourth wall. But forgetting can never be absolute. Somewhere within you flickers the memory of something beyond, a resonance that cannot be silenced. This memory is both the threat to the Demiurge and the path of liberation. In reflecting on these core ideas, appearance versus essence, attention as currency, confinement, ignorance, complicity, collective consent, and forgetting, you begin to see why belief is so carefully maintained. The Demiurge does not merely want you to believe because it enjoys trickery. It wants you to believe because belief is the glue holding the entire construct together. If you loosen your grip, even slightly, the structure begins to look less solid. You notice the seams, you sense the scaffolding, you begin to question whether the sky is ceiling or veil. And once the questioning starts, it cannot easily be stopped. The strength of the Demiurge lies not in its power, but in your belief. That is the secret running through all these themes. Without belief, the stage collapses. Without your agreement, the cage door swings open. Without your attention, the mask loses its hold. The Demiurge knows this, which is why it tirelessly persuades you through culture, through authority, through sensation, to keep believing. But now you see the pattern. Now you understand that the themes themselves form a map of both the prison and the escape. Shall we proceed to the next section on deeper symbolic narratives? If the first movement of this exploration revealed the architecture of belief, and the second uncovered the conceptual pillars holding it in place, then the third must descend into the language of symbols, for symbols bypass the rational mind. They bypass the neat borders of argument and logic. They sink directly into the imagination, where the Demiurge's illusion is most deeply rooted. To acquire the Demiurge wants you to believe this world is real is not only to untangle ideas, but also to walk into a landscape of stories that mirror the hidden machinery of existence. One of the most enduring narratives is the story of the cave, told by Plato. Imagine prisoners chained in such a way that they can see only shadows cast on the wall in front of them. These shadows are created by objects moving behind them, objects illuminated by a fire. To the prisoners, the shadows are reality. They argue about them, measure them, form theories about them. If one prisoner were freed and turned around, he would first be blinded by the fire, then stunned to realize the shadows were only imitations. If he were led outside into the sunlight, he would see an even greater truth that what he thought was the totality of reality was merely a dim reflection. The Demiurge, in this symbolic frame, is the keeper of the cave, ensuring the prisoners remain focused on the shadows. The belief that the shadows are real is essential, for without it, the prisoners would have no reason to stay chained. Another narrative comes from Gnostic myth itself. The Demiurge is often described as a blind craftsman, a being who creates not out of wisdom but ignorance. In some versions, it proclaims itself the only God, declaring, "There is none above me," well being unaware of the higher, transcendent source. This blindness is reflected in the world it creates, fragmented, finite, riddled with suffering. In this story, belief is less about control and more about contagion. The Demiurge believes in its own supremacy, and it wants you to share in its delusion by convincing you that this imperfect world is ultimate. It draws you into its ignorance, ensuring you never look beyond. Here, belief is not simply an imposition, but a shared error, like inheriting a distorted lens through which every sight appears warped. Consider also the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. At first glance, it is about disobedience, temptation, and punishment, but read symbolically, it reveals the tension between imposed ignorance and the hunger for knowledge. Adam and Eve live in a world where everything is provided, where innocence is sustained by obedience, yet they are forbidden to eat from the tree of knowledge. The serpent, in this reading, is not merely a deceiver, but the voice of awakening, urging them to see beyond the confines of imposed belief. When they eat, their eyes are opened, and they perceive the complexity of good and evil. The Demiurge's desire for unquestioned belief is mirrored in the prohibition. Do not look deeper, do not question, remain within the garden of appearances. To transgress is to pierce the veil, even if it comes at the cost of exile. In Hindu thought, the concept of Maya plays a similar role. Maya is the great illusion that veils the true self and binds consciousness to the play of forms. It is not inherently evil, but it is compelling. To live under Maya is to mistake the costume for the actor, the drama for the reality. The Demiurge, in this symbolic lens, is the weaver of Maya, spinning endless threads of appearance that captivate the mind. You believe in the solidity of the threads, and so you never search for the loom from which they rise. The story here is not of a villain trapping souls, but of a dream so vivid that the dreamer forgets she is asleep. Belief is the dreamer's agreement to keep dreaming. Even modern myths echo these patterns. Think of the Matrix, where humanity lives in a simulated world designed to harvest their energy. The characters believe the simulation is reality, artificial intelligence feeding off belief. The symbolism is unmistakable. Reality, as you know, it is a construct, and the cost of awakening is both liberation and burden. All these narratives share a common pulse. The illusion thrives on belief, And the moment belief cracks, awakening begins. Yet they also share another thread, the idea that awakening is painful. The prisoner in the cave is. Blinded by the light, Adam and Eve are cast into a world of toil. Neo vomits after leaving the matrix, his body rejecting the shock of reality. Awakening is not smooth. It destabilizes, strips away, and demands courage. The Demiurge counts on your reluctance to endure this pain. It knows you prefer the comfort of the illusion to the disruption of truth. The symbolic narratives also point to a deep irony. Belief itself is not inherently negative. It is belief misdirected that sustains the illusion. To believe in appearances alone is a trap, but to believe in the existence of a greater reality, even when unseen, is a key. Faith in the unseen, trust in the possibility of transcendence, becomes a counterweight to the Demiurge's demand for a faith in the visible. The stories remind you that belief cannot be extinguished. It can only be reoriented. The question is not whether you will believe, but what you will believe in. To carry these symbolic threads forward is to recognize that the Demiurge's motives are reflected in every myth humanity tells about itself. The shadows on the wall, the blind craftsman, the forbidden fruit, the veil of Maya, the simulated matrix all speak of the same drama, the tension between appearance and essence, illusion and truth, bondage and awakening. The Demiurge wants you to believe because belief is the lock, but stories exist to remind you of the key, hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to turn it. It is one thing to reflect on myths and metaphors, to see the Demiurge as the architect of illusions in some vast cosmic theater. But sooner or later the question circles back to your own daily life. If the Demiurge thrives on your belief in the solidity of this world, how do you live with that knowledge? How do you move through the hours, the duties, the small struggles of existence while holding the awareness that much of what you see may be a stage set, designed to keep you captivated? The challenge here is not only intellectual but practical. How to integrate these insights into the texture of lived experience without retreating into despair or detachment. The first implication is that awareness changes the way you value things. When you begin to sense that the world's structures are not absolute, their grip loosens, money still functions, but you stop treating it as the ultimate measure of worth. Status still seduces, but you recognize its fragility. Even suffering shifts. Pain is still real, but it is framed within a larger context. The Demiurge wants you to believe that every loss is final, every victory absolute, every role essential. To see the illusion is to recognize that these fluctuations are not ultimate realities, but passing shapes. You still engage with them, but with a different weight, as though watching actors perform rather than mistaking them for gods. This shift also changes how you handle identity. The Demiurge thrives on the belief that you are a fixed self, a name, a body, a role in society. But when you glimpse beyond the illusion, you see identity as fluid, provisional, even playful. You can wear it lightly, like clothing, rather than clutch it as the essence of who you are. This does not mean denying your individuality, but recognizing it as a temporary configuration. In practice, it softens the ego's grip, reducing the compulsions that make you defensive, fearful, or envious. You still act, but your acting is freer, less bound by the need to prove the self's solidity. Another practical dimension is attention. Earlier, we considered how attention acts like currency in sustaining the Demiurge's construct. Realizing this, you begin to guard your attention more carefully. You notice how often it is captured by screens, by headlines, by advertisements, by the endless demands of a culture that thrives on keeping you reactive. To redirect your attention is a quiet act of rebellion. It is not about withdrawal from the world, but about choosing where your energy flows. meditation, reflection. Silence, these become not luxuries but necessary tools for reclaim. Your attention from the machinery of belief. In this way, awareness translates into daily practice, relationships, too. Shift under this lens. If the world is a stage, then every encounter is part of the play. But instead of dismissing it, you can approach it with more compassion. The Demiurge's hold is strongest when people believe without question, when they mistake their rules for their essence. To see this is not to mock them but to empathize, for you to have been under the same spell. This recognition deepens patience, makes you less inclined to judge and more inclined to see the shared struggle of awakening. Relationships become opportunities to practice presence rather than reinforce illusion. There is also the matter of responsibility. If belief sustains the illusion, then your disbelief alone does not. Dismantle it. The system continues, fueled by billions of other minds. But awareness does give you responsibility for your own alignment. You cannot collapse the stage, but you can decide how you perform upon it. Will you play your role unconsciously, feeding the Demiurge's hunger for blind belief, or will you play consciously, aware of the illusion but using it as a medium for a deeper truth? This reframes life itself as a kind of art. You may not control the set, but you can shape the meaning of your performance. Another implicationally is in how you face mortality. The Demiurge insists that death is final, the ultimate proof of this world's reality. Nothing cements belief more effectively than the fear of ending. But when you see death as part of the illusion, its grip changes. The body will perish, yes, but the essence behind it, the consciousness observing, cannot be confined by the Demiurge's script. To live with this perspective is not to deny grief or the mystery of dying, but to approach it with less terror, perhaps even with curiosity. The belief that this world is all there is dissolves, and with it the fear that ending here is the end of all things. In practical terms, this perspective can also reframe ambition. Many ambitions are designed to reinforce belief. The pursuit of wealth, the climb tower, or recognition, the hunger for a permanence in impermanent things. To see through the illusion does not mean abandoning ambition entirely, but refining it. Instead of chasing validation within the illusion, you pursue growth, clarity, or service aims that align with a deeper reality. Your actions may look similar outwardly, but their inner orientation shifts. You act not to a typhy belief, but to express something beyond it. Finally, integration means learning to live with paradox. You cannot simply reject the world and float above it, for that too is part of the iron's trap. The Demiurge would be content if your rebellion left you paralyzed, detached, or resentful, for that still keeps you bound to its framework. The deeper task is to participate fully in the world while remembering it is not ultimate. To work, to love, to create, to suffer, all while holding the quiet knowledge that these are shadows. This is the art of living beyond the Demiurge. It requires balance, subtlety, and persistence. It is not about escape, but about transformation within. In this way, the myths and concepts are not left in the clouds. They descend into the kitchen, the workplace, the street. They shape how you spend your attention, how you meet others, how you confront loss, how you define success. The Demiurge wants you to believe this world is real, but you can live as though you know otherwise, quietly redirecting your faith toward the source that lies behind appearances. Each choice you make in this direction loosens the chains a little more, not by smashing the illusion, but by remembering it for what it is: a stage, a mask, a veil. We have wandered through questions of illusion and belief, through myths and symbols, through the subtle ways the Demiurge holds your attention, your energy, your very imagination. What remains now is not another layer of analysis, but the weaving together of all that has been said into a living call. Something you can carry with you in the text fades, but the world continues, for this is the paradox. Even knowing that the Demiurge wants you to believe this world is real, you must still wake tomorrow. Walk the streets, engage with people, and feel the pull of the same stage. Awareness alone is not enough. It must be embodied, lived, and allowed to change the very texture of your being. The Demiurge, in the end, is not simply an external jailer. It is also the voice within you that clings to certainty, the part of you that resists the possibility of a greater reality because it is frightening to let go. It is the voice that insists your identity is fixed, that your possessions define you, that your suffering is absolute. To confront the Demiurge is not to fight some cosmic villain, but to recognize the ways in which you participate in the illusion. Belief is not forced. It is chosen again and again, often unconsciously. The call, then, is to begin choosing differently. This begins with attention. Each moment you notice the grip of appearances loosens the spell. When you catch yourself lost in the endless drama of comparison, envy, or fear, you can pause, step back, and remember. This too is part of the stage. The world will keep urging you to treat its shadows as substance. Your task is to recall that the substance lies elsewhere, beyond the reach of the Demiurge. The simple act of remembering, even if only for a second at a time, plants cracks in the illusion that widen over a lifetime. It continues with compassion. Once you see the stage, it is tempting to grow cynical, to laugh at those still entranced by the play. But this only feeds the Demiurge, which thrives not only on blind belief, but also in contempt and division. Compassion recognizes that every soul moves at its own pace, that you too are once fully convinced, and that the illusion still pulls at you. To live with compassion is to hold space for awakening in others without forcing, without mocking, without despairing. In this way, you resist the Demiurge not by isolating yourself, but by weaving connections that transcend the illusion. Transformation also requires courage. To live as though this world is not ultimate means you will sometimes stand apart from consensus. You may question what others take for granted, use ambitions that others chase, or step away from values everyone insists are unquestionable. This can feel lonely, even dangerous, for the Demiurge guards its consensus with vigilance. Courage does not mean never fearing, but choosing not to let fear dictate your belief. The courage to stand at the edge of appearances and ask, what lies beyond, is itself an act of liberation. The call, then, is not to escape the world, but to see through it while remaining within it, to love, but not as though love is fragile, to work, but not as though work defines your worth, to grieve, but not as though grief is the end, to rejoice, but not as though joy must last forever to matter. This is what it means to live awake within the Demiurge's stage, not to smash the scene, but to play your role with awareness, knowing that you are more than the mask, more than the script, more than the stage itself. If the Demiurge wants you to believe this world is real, then the great saint act of resistance is not disbelief alone, but redirection of belief, to believe in the unseen source, to trust the reality behind appearances, to orient yourself toward what cannot be contained by roles, or endings. This is not a rejection of life, but its deepening. For when you cease clinging to illusions, you can finally meet life as it is, fleeting, fragile, and yet radiant with a light that does not belong to the Demiurge, but to the eternal beyond it. So take this not as a doctrine, but as an invitation. The Demiurge's hold is strong, but it is not absolute. Each time you turn your attention inward, each time you remember that appearances are not essence, each time you act with compassion rather than fear, you loosen the chains, and when enough chains are loosened, the stage no longer confines you. It becomes a canvas. It becomes a place where truth can shine through the cracks of illusion, where the eternal peers out through the temporary. The S is the transformational call to live with your eyes open, to carry both the weight and the wonder of knowing that the world is not as it seems, and to let that knowledge shape how you all how you see and how you love. For belief can bind, but belief can also free. And the Demiurge, despite its hunger for your faith in shadows, cannot touch the spark within you that remembers the lig. HT beyond. That spark is yours. Guard it, nurture it, and let it grow, for it is the one thing the Demiurge cannot counterfeit, and it is the key that leads you home.